Tonight, fighting off the C word. Saskatchewan firefighters push for better cancer protection.
Your mind just goes, right? And you don't hear anything after that.
Also, on the eve of the 5th anniversary of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash, we look at what is still needed when it comes to safety on Saskatchewan highways.
I'd have to say they're not much safer.
Plus, how aerial support saved an 86-year-old man who wandered away from his vehicle after getting stuck in the snow.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It is Wednesday, April 5th, and the CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. A mother who lost her child in the Humboldt Broncos bus crash says there's still more that needs to be done to keep Saskatchewan highways safe. The tragedy happened when a transport truck with an inexperienced driver drove through a stop sign. Tomorrow marks the 5th anniversary, and as Sam Sampson explains, victims' families and their supporters are still calling for action.
Carol Bronze knows her limits. When she watches Humboldt hockey, she sits on this side of the ice.
I don't like seeing the players' bench.
Why not?
Because she's not there.
Her daughter Dana was the athletic therapist for the Humboldt Broncos in 2018. The whole team was driving to an April playoff game when their bus crashed into a semi that ran a stop sign. 16 people died. The novice semi-driver, Jaskirat Singh Sidhu, had 3 weeks of training and supervision. The tragedy forced trucking standards into the spotlight.
Would you say the roads are any safer now than they were in 2018?
That's a tough one. I'd have to say they're not much safer, if at all.
At the time, only Ontario required drivers to take training before getting a license. That still isn't the case everywhere. Today, 6 jurisdictions require training before testing. 5 tell CBC training will be mandatory. New Brunswick is looking into it. Nunavut has optional training, but trucking licenses there aren't valid anywhere else. Every area in Canada has entry-level training available. The training was standardized in 2021, but there are still huge differences across the country.
I hired somebody from a different province. He was trained to be an instructor. He was worse than one of the students that I had.
But more rules means more time and costs to fill Canada's driver shortage. Without enough inspectors, advocates worry shady schools cut corners to fill labor gaps.
There has to be a fear of getting caught if you're breaking rules and regulations. And there just isn't enough of that fear out there right now.
You can have prayers and thoughts all you want, but unless you're willing to do something to back it up. I know that sounds very cynical, but it's the truth.
Bronze's mission to make roads safer keeps her going on her hardest days, like next month, when she'll mark Dana's 30th birthday without her daughter. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Humboldt, Saskatchewan.
The greatest risk facing firefighters in Saskatchewan is not fire, it's cancer. Last summer, the World Health Organization declared firefighting as a job carcinogenic. Months later, firefighters in this province are still pushing past that fear, despite tight budgets, unhealthy equipment, and lacking sick benefits. Nicholas Fruit reports.
This is what Ames Leslie loves to do. A firefighter for more than half his life, he's now undergoing chemotherapy.
As soon as you hear that C word, that cancer word, your mind just goes, right? And you don't hear anything after that.
Last summer, the World Health Organization found that firefighting directly contributes to cancer risk. Firefighters breathe in toxins. Their skin absorbs them too.
All our firefighters have their own lockers. They have wildland firefighting gear.
And this equipment, even it's part of the problem.
All manufacturers claim that they have the best gear, but it's all loaded with chemicals that are killing firefighters. The gear is supposed to protect us, not kill us.
The Weyburn Fire Department is a leader in Saskatchewan when it comes to cancer prevention. For example, it stocks extra gear to swap out, but even it falls short. There are no showers.
They're cross-contaminating their vehicle, their house, their laundry machine.
Lee says the lack of money is stopping them and other departments from doing more. And if a firefighter gets cancer, workers' compensation varies across the country. This Regina firefighter is waiting for biopsy results from a mass on his thyroid. If it's thyroid cancer, he won't be covered under workers' compensation in his home province. That's because it's not one of the cancers Saskatchewan presumes to be tied to firefighting.
If I lived 3 hours down the road in Brandon, Manitoba, I would be covered. So the discrepancy is frustrating and not fair.
The types of cancer covered by workers' compensation varies province to province.
It really bothered me that, how could someone who's doing the same job in one province be covered, but not in another province?
This Liberal MP introduced a bill now making its way through the Senate to push for parity in workers' compensation coverage across Canada, in both prevention and treatment. Nicholas Frew, CBC News, Regina.
That push for better prevention is something that hits home with Nikki McClelland. Her husband, Darren, was Swift Current's fire chief, and he died from cancer 3 years ago at the age of 48. Nikki joins us now from Swift Current. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
As you watch that story, what goes through your mind?
As I watch the story, everything's relatable. It's also real, and everything comes back. It's been 3 years now, and just listening to the firefighter in North Battleford and how he said the C word. I remember that time as if it was yesterday, hearing that Darren had cancer, and everything just stops. And just with one of the firefighters in Regina, Tyler, just having thyroid cancer or going through chemo, and it's so relatable, and it brings back everything.
When you go back to your husband's colon cancer diagnosis, what do you remember about thinking how likely it was that it was caused by his work as a firefighter?
Maybe at the time it didn't register. I think we're just so focused, but as time went on and dealing with workers' comp and seeing if he was eligible for a claim, as we spoke about fires that Darren had fought, there were some fires that have went through our minds of what could have may cause this. There was a huge chemical fire in Swift Current, and Darren and another firefighter and 2 other firefighters were on the call, and it was a chemical fire, and both of those, Darren and the other firefighter that were fighting the fire, both have since passed.
What improvements would you like to see?
As the last 3 years have went by, we've been talking with workers' comp and talking with the firefighters about fire prevention and cancer. I think they are on the right path with better gear, masks, and I know when Darren was on the fire department, they were talking about even wash machines and getting the heavy duty wash machines and how to wash their gear and how to prevent the chemicals getting into their bodies, and infrared saunas and helping them detoxify after a fire. So there those things. I'll leave that up to the firefighters, and for my experience with the cancer itself, I think better, more intense, extreme medicals. Darren always had medicals, and I know all the firefighters get yearly medicals, but I think for cancer, there's more testing that can be done and should be done. Maybe not on a yearly basis, but starting with a baseline with tumor markers or talking to oncologists and how to read. So Darren's cancer, when we found it, was too advanced. I feel if we could get it sooner, it may have changed the outcome. So early prevention is key. And I think there are tests to be done in each different departments of the cancers, and to do better prevention with more intense medicals.
Weyburn's fire chief says money is one of the biggest obstacles to better prevention. Given your personal experience, what would you tell decision makers?
How much money do you put on a human's life, I guess? But I know funding and money is always an issue. I guess I would ask the question is, how much money was put into Darren's cancer and chemo and surgeries? Workers' comp paid for Darren's time off and paid for a lot of, that claim was probably quite expensive. I wonder how much money went into that compared to maybe that money taken to try to prevent. I know when we talk about medicals and tumor markers, everything costs money to have those tests done, but I think in the long run, that money would have been well spent in preventing then the afterthought and the chemos and the surgeries, and just paying out the claim after his loss.
Nikki, thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry for your loss and appreciate you sharing your story.
Thank you for listening.
Nikki McClellan is the widow of Swift Current Fire Chief Darren McClellan, who died from work-related cancer. The official opposition are continuing to call for ambulance reform in Saskatchewan. Today, they released internal logbooks they acquired through a Freedom of Information request. The NDP says the documents show a health system on the brink of collapse. The logbooks show multiple incidents over the first 6 weeks of the year where emergency rooms were over capacity and ambulances had to wait as long as 10 hours to offload patients.
This might be a hard truth for that minister to stomach, but here's the fact. These delays and the backlogs are created by his government's failures. That's it. And they don't just impact Regina, Mr. Speaker. The ripple effects go out into other communities too.
We will make sure that we have the proper ambulances support. That's why in this year's budget, Mr. Speaker, we had $8.8 million to increase EMS services around the province.
The NDP says the money in the recent budget is a Band-Aid solution rather than a real fix. The streets around the Delta Besborough Hotel in downtown Saskatoon were blocked off today in anticipation of protests around the Royal Bank of Canada's annual general meeting.
I was so shocked when I came here this morning and seen all the police and all the fences and all the barricades. It's like, why? Why are they so afraid of us?
Around 150 protesters gathered outside, including Indigenous leaders and environmental activists. They called on the bank to divest from its fossil fuel investments. That includes the Coastal GasLink pipeline in BC that's contested by Wet'suwet'en and Hereditary leadership. BIPOC delegates who had proxy say they were denied entry to the main room at the AGM.
And I came all the way here, thousands of miles away, leaving my 6 children home, to tell the Royal Bank of Canada at its annual AGM to stop funding environmental racism. But it was clear today that the Royal Bank of Canada sets the standard for racism in general. I was denied access and entry into the main room of the AGM simply on the merits of being a Black woman. They had no other reason for denying me entry.
In a statement, RBC says it supports energy development that is done in an environmentally and socially responsible manner with meaningful consultations with Indigenous peoples. The Saskatoon Blades have a chance to tie it up tonight as they face off against Connor Bedard and the Regina Pats in Game 4 of the first round of the WHL playoffs. The Pats were up by 2 in the series, but Saskatoon pulled off a big win last night. In front of a sold-out Brand Centre crowd with less than a minute to go, Saskatoon on the power play down by 1. A scramble by the net and a goal to tie the game at 3. They're headed to overtime, and it does not take long for a game winner. Forward Igor Sidorov comes flying in with the goal, and the Blades take Game 3. The Pats do still lead the series 2-1. Game 4 is tonight. Puck drops at 7 at the Brand Centre. Game 5 will be back in Saskatoon Friday night.
When you host a festival like the Grey Cup, that's one of the first things that comes to mind is you have the opportunity as a result of hosting that game and that festival to give back.
The Grey Cup Legacy Grant program will give money to 9 youth projects in Saskatchewan. It made the announcement today at Mamaweatatin Centre in Regina. It's one of the recipients and will use its share for Indigenous land-based learning. More than 200 groups applied for funding. The money comes from the 50-50 draw at last November's Grey Cup in Regina. In total, $227,000 is being split between 9 projects in 9 different communities. We'll be back after the break.
This weather update is brought to you by Capital GMC Buick Cadillac. Super Sierra and SUV sale is on now.
And our weather specialist, Ethan Williams, joins me now. When can I put my boots away?
I'd say give it until June, maybe, at this point. You know, I don't want to be that guy who, says, go ahead, put it away, and then, 2 weeks later, it's like, you got to bring them out again. But anyway, that's my job, I guess. Anyway, it has certainly been very cold. We still have snow sticking around, and in fact, record-breaking overnight lows, yes, through southwestern and west central Saskatchewan. Rosetown, look at that, minus 26.2 overnight last night. Leader smashing your old record, which was set back in 1975. Lucky Lake, Kindersley, Last Mountain Lake, all around minus 25. And we are likely going to expect record-breaking temperatures again overnight tonight, including in Regina. We could possibly break a very long-standing record. Now, we do have temperature stats as well from the month of March from Environment Canada, and no surprise here, all stations reporting well below normal conditions. The second coldest March in 46 years in Key Lake, top 10 coldest in a lot of places, and both Regina and Saskatoon almost 7 degrees below the average. A lot of stations reporting not even a day above average through the entire month. And in fact, in Regina and Saskatoon, usually we see about 17 days in the month of March above the freezing mark. This year in Regina, we had 2 in the month of March, and in Saskatoon, we just had 1. So that gives you a bit of an idea. And we did not get above freezing in either city this afternoon. And really, through much of south and central Saskatchewan, we did not see that either, except for the southwest, where we're still above freezing in Maple Creek right now, but close to minus 10 in a lot of locations. And high pressure, of course, a big culprit for that. Put this in motion and you see not much is really going to change. We're looking at clear conditions overnight again, maybe some fog in southern sections, but this high pressure is going to begin to move out, and that will eventually increase our temperatures as we go through the next few days. What's helping that is that we're seeing this ridge in the upper atmosphere starting to move its way eastward, and it's a pretty significant ridge building in. So we're going to be seeing that warmer Pacific air, high pressure locking in place the sunny conditions and some of that warmer air as well. But of course, when it gets warmer, we have to pay for it with a little bit of wind as well. And I think that's going to be the case, especially as we head into Friday. Some gusts could be between 40 and 50 kilometers an hour in southwestern sections, and a lot of us kind of in that 30 to 40 kilometer an hour range. And Regina, I think specifically Friday, Saturday is going to be the breeziest. And that, of course, is when we're also going to be seeing that warm up. Overnight lows potentially getting above the freezing mark as we head into the beginning of next week. Again, we have been seeing over these past few days the daytime highs not quite getting as high as what's forecast because of the snow that's still on the ground, but nonetheless, I think we'll finally see some above freezing conditions as we head into the Easter weekend, and some sunny conditions as well. For Saskatoon, there is the possibility that we could see some mixed precipitation on Wednesday, but overall, not a bad forecast, Sam, and we will get that nice warm up.
And that flurry's next week's problem.
Exactly. Don't worry about it.
Thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
A new women's exhibit has skated its way into the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto. It's dedicated to the trailblazers of Canada's national sport, and it includes artifacts from more than 130 years ago. Some legendary Hall of Famers were there to drop the puck on the exhibit, along with some members of the national team. We'll be back after the break. The federal government says it's hopeful a new compensation agreement on First Nations child welfare will end a long legal battle. The deal is worth more than $23 billion for children and families harmed by Ottawa's underfunding of services on reserve. As Olivia Stefanovich reports, it could be precedent-setting.
A breakthrough, 16 years in the making.
We are proud to say that this revised agreement is the best possible for our children and families who have been so significantly impacted by Canada's discrimination.
a new proposed settlement for long-awaited compensation, addressing Canada's chronic underfunding of the First Nations child welfare system, along with delays and denials of essential health services.
I believe we finally have turned a corner to bring this wait to an end.
A historic $23 billion deal to right historical wrongs.
Imagine being 11 years old and being on the street in Saskatoon. I have no idea how I made it. I don't know how I made it.
Recognition of the harm caused by a broken system that separated more First Nations children from their families and cultures than at the height of the residential school era.
Being a survivor of the child welfare system, it's kind of like walking in society as a ghost.
Life-changing reparations could roll out as soon as the end of the year, but only if the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal and federal court sign off on the proposal. The Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations is hopeful the deal will put an end to inequitable funding for the foreseeable future.
Any government that would purport to cut in this area would get a very severe reminder, not only in courts, but I think by the Canadian public.
This is about healing relationships.
The Indigenous Services Minister says it's also a turning point in the way the government works with Indigenous peoples.
Part of that is leaning into the difficult conversations and understanding where we can do better as partners.
Along with compensation, the agreement also includes a request for an official apology, one that's expected to be made by the Prime Minister as soon as the deal is approved. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
And Ethan's back with one last look at your weather.
And it'll be clear but possibly foggy tonight in a lot of south and central locations, minus 18 in Regina. But as we head into tomorrow morning, frigid even you could call this for this time of year, minus 20 with a wind chill still near minus 30. So frostbite definitely a concern as we head overnight tonight. We're looking for a mix of sun and cloud and then mainly sunny conditions as we head toward the afternoon. Gusts picking up just a little bit. In Saskatoon again, fog possible for you as well. Not quite as cold as Regina tomorrow morning, but fairly close. Wind chill still around minus 25. And then as we head into the afternoon hours again, we're looking for those mainly sunny conditions. Getting a little bit warmer than Regina, I think, but still southeast winds going to make that fairly chilly. So be careful even if you're venturing out tonight, Sam.
Thank you and no thank you, Ethan.
Yeah, it doesn't look good.
And before we leave you, we wanted to share a story with a very happy ending for an 86-year-old man who wandered away from his vehicle after getting stuck in the snow.
We've got him here with us.
You're watching aerial video from the Saskatoon Police Aerial Support Unit. This is the moment the man is rescued in a snowy field near Borden. He got his vehicle stuck Saturday night. A witness saw him walking without proper winter clothes or boots and called police. It was cold and dark, so Warman RCMP requested help from the Saskatoon police plane. The man was found 2.5 kilometers from his vehicle about 2 hours after he was reported missing.
Yeah, Moss, can you send EMS to our location? He's pretty cold. I'm worried about hypothermia.
The man was cold but not hurt and was reunited with his family. Happy ending after all. An incredible video. That is it for us tonight. For News Anytime, you can always head to our website or subscribe to CBC Saskatchewan's YouTube channel. Ethan will be back with more local news and that cold weather at 11. Thank you for watching and have a great night.